All right, and welcome back to another movie comm. And today we're going to be talking about, while watching, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the original one that came out in 1990. Now, as usual, some people might be wanting to follow along. So if you are, I am at the very beginning of the film as you start to see the overview of New York City, because some people will be following along with a streaming service, and other people will be following along with a DVD or Blu-ray. So just to make sure everybody's in the same spot that is interested, here we go. So we're going to press play in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, press play. Now, of course, the motion picture starts out in overview of New York, and then you get different shots of traffic and everything like that, and then you start to hear April O'Neil's voice on the as a voiceover, pretty much, as being the reporter. But one thing that I want to say about this film is that not only was the timing right in terms of when it came out, because everything was booming, right? The video games for the regular Nintendo were booming. Turtles in Time was still on its way for the Super Nintendo. And the toys were selling like crazy as far as Ninja Turtles are concerned. The cartoon was just everywhere. There wasn't a single kid that wasn't into Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles at that time, right? Well, this movie was amazing because, well, it was very much adult themed as well. How do I put this? The tone of this film, they got it right to where pretty much anybody can watch this film. Seriously, there was nothing like the cheese factor of the 90s and stuff like that, and things that appeal to kids is at a very minimum in this movie. As a matter of fact, more often than not, there's less there's a lot more seriousness to the film as opposed to the opposite. So that's one thing that this movie definitely got right. And then the score for the movie was really good, and it fit very well. The action was very good. Everything was a lot more believable. Like when you went on to watch, let's say Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3, the turtles kind of look like toys or whatnot. They look plasticky, but in this film, they actually look more real, despite the fact that Turtles 3 wouldn't come out for another, I believe, 3 years after this film. So, but even when you listen to the score, at this point right now, I mean, it's got a serious tone to it. It's not, even the Turtles theme in this film is, it's good, but again, it's not like a theme to where you're like, oh, I got to listen to this. It's good. So, and then you've got kids, teenagers doing crimes and stuff like that. The foot soldiers. I mean, there's a theme in this film, or multiple themes in this film, that teenagers could relate to. Obviously, with the turtles being the turtles, the kids could relate to them, especially Michelangelo. And then you've got the adults, because you got things that April O'Neil is dealing with, stuff that Casey Jones will be dealing with, and even the turtles themselves to a degree. And then, of course, Splinter being the mentor and the things that happen to him. But it's his words. And here's April O'Neil just leaving the news station or whatnot with the yellow jackets. I think that's kind of a nod to the cartoon, because in the cartoon she wore nothing but yellow. Obviously, it's not the case here, but she's got this yellow, looks like it looks like a raincoat. But I think the color is a nod, and then the yellow socks as well. It's and the shoes to a degree as well. It's a nod to what she looks like in the cartoon. So that was a nice touch as well. Basically to remind the audience that, hey, this came from such and such. And there's some gangsters over here, basically robbing one of the news vans. And then they try to rob her. Ooh. And then they get her to the ground. And then all of a sudden, Raph's side just takes out the lights, and the audience is left to pure imagination in terms of what happens. And obviously, when the lights come back on, you kind of see what happens. And then you hear Michelangelo. He's like, whoa. And again, the voice actors for the Turtles are really good too. Oh, look, one guy's kind of hogtied, but in reverse. Oh, shoot. Look at that. And any Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle fan would know that that's pretty much Raph, because of the red bandana, obviously. And he wants his Sai at this point, but April O'Neil sees it and she decides to take it. And yes, size are actually that big. I've seen a few that are slightly bigger, if I'm not mistaken, but I believe that's your average size Psy, believe it or not. It wasn't just that big because of the fact that the turtles have big hands. The size are actually that big. So, and then of course you get the turtles theme going, and then you get the sewers. And yeah, again, the theme and the color palette of this movie also kind of goes along with the theme. It's surprisingly dark, but not so dark that it ruins the film or feels out of place. It's actually pretty solid. And then you see the shadows or whatnot of the turtles, and then Michelangelo talking, the way he talks is just spot on, and you could tell it's Donatello because of the bow staff. And they make their appearance. Like 5 minutes into the film, you see them all. Give or take 5 minutes. And again, all of them doing what they do. So, and remember, they're teenagers. So at the same time, they're going to have that, you know, but they're not immature and they're not cheesy and everything like that. And of course, Raph being in the back, he's the one, of course, with the temper. And it's always going to be like that with Raph. And that's what makes him unique. You know, Donatello is the smart one and the logical one. Leonardo is the leader of the group, who kind of, you know, keeps his shit together. And then you've got Michelangelo, who's funny as hell and is all about the pizza. So, I mean, and then of course you got Splinter to balance things out between all the four of them. So it's a really good balancing factor in this film. And they're coming in and they're like, yeah, we're all excited and everything. And even Leonardo is overhyped, and then he kind of calms down a little bit. So obviously he's you know, he's very much grown mentally. All of them are, but you know, even Michelangelo, he wants to he's got the phone book out because he wants to call and order a pizza, but he manages to kind of slow down while he walks in that direction, and he stops for a second because he's listening to what Splinter has to say. So even Michelangelo, the supposed most immature of all the four turtles, you know, even he stops and he listens. You know, he knows, you know, just little things like that, you know. Donnie tries to, you know, calm Raph down, and Raph pretty much, you know, Raph definitely has a temper in this film, and it shows multiple times. And Donatello is not happy with the fact that he took a punch from Raph right there. So, and you can tell from the eyes. And Splinter, of course, having the having wise words to say, and then he has to throw something. He's got to throw a little book at Michelangelo because, well, he's ordering a pizza in the middle of everything, and Splinter's just in the middle of speech. And even Raph in the back at the end, he pays attention as well, even though he's pissed off, which gets a lot. It takes a lot for Raph to, you know, when he's pissed off, it kind of takes a little bit more for him to calm down. Again, that's what makes him unique. I would still say that if Raph, you know, managed to control his anger, I'd probably say he'd probably be the best fighter of the crew. They're all very good, but I think Raph would probably be the best fighter of them all if he manages to control his shit, which has been his difficulty. Leo is the one who can control it. So Donnie and Mike just dancing, and they're all dancing. They're all enjoying it. So it's good to, you know, it's also good to see this side of Leonardo, because usually in a lot of depictions, Leonardo is like, especially in the animated film that would come many years later, that would be, you know, the sequel to the third film. That was, you know, even though it was all animated, you know, Leo just takes everything so seriously, and, you know, And then they order a pizza and they're waiting for the pizza, and then Michelangelo's just keeping track of the time. He's like, did you ever think about what Splinter said tonight? Donnie's like, and then Mike is just constantly thinking about the pizza. And then Mike and Donatello is just thinking about what Splinter said. So again, $3 up, time's up. The pizza's a little bit late. Never pays full price. Forgiveness is divine, but never pay full price for late pizza. That's what he's going to say later on. But the pizza delivery guy shows up and he's looking. He's like, 122 and an eighth? 122 and an eighth. He's like, where is it? Where's 122 and an eighth? He's like, you're standing on it, dude. And then there goes the $10 bill. Oh man, the good old days where getting a pizza was just $10. A large pizza at that. But the tab was 13 though. He's like, you're 2 minutes late, dude. He's like, come on, I couldn't find the place. Poor guy. He's like, oh, I thought I delivered everywhere. Now, despite the fact that they ordered everything they ordered on that pizza, I don't know if... Does it have all the toppings that even ordered? I don't see any pepperoni on there, despite the fact that Michelangelo, one of the toppings he asked for was pepperoni. But hey, what do I know? I can't see it from here anyway. Suspension of disbelief. That disguise is perfect. Okay, I'm gonna get a disguise like that so nobody can recognize me, because they can't recognize Raph. But again, just following along with the cartoon, another nod to the cartoon. Suspension of disbelief is a big one. They wore those a lot in the cartoon, and I'm glad they kept that in the film. Little burglary going on, and oh, look at that. The purse just... Oh, okay, well, Raph took it probably. Back in the old days where the guys used to be scared at the size of a sigh. And here we get the introduction to Casey Jones with a very unique looking hockey mask, at least in my opinion, but it's got to match the cartoon, which again is faithful in terms of his overall look. And of course, despite the fact that he's, taking care of crime, he's also got a comedic side to him. So at this point, they're both talking to each other, and it's like they have a lot in common, but at the same time, you got two alphas that are basically going back and forth. And Casey Jones just wants to kind of do his part and kind of teach criminals a lesson to a certain degree, and then getting it on with Raph a little bit. Two-for-one sale on the bats. What are you, a punker? And that's so funny. He's like, oh, I hate punkers, especially bald ones with green makeup. Who wear masks over ugly faces. That's actually kind of funny because that's pretty much what it is. It's makeup and kind of a mask or and prosthetics and stuff. That's actually kind of interesting. Raphael wins 1-0. New game, cricket. And he called him Roundhead. That's kind of funny. Doing a little bit of cricket, and he doesn't see it coming. He's going to go boom. Raph goes flying. And then literally lands in the trash. Ooh, now Raph took that personally. So as Casey Jones ran away, he called him a freak. He's like, so long, freak, I got work to do. And then Raph's pissed. He's like, you called me freak, and then chasing after him. That's actually funny. He's like, what was that? He's like, that's a big turtle with a trench coat. And a nice view of New York City. A lot of people call it the city that never sleeps, as well as the heart of America. What do you guys think? You guys agree with that? You guys agree with the heart of America and New York being that state, or do you guys think it's another state? Everybody else is asleep except for Splinter as Raph walks in the house. And he's like, can't this wait till morning? He's like, nope, you're going to listen. Splinter wants to talk to him. So he's the one who's different among all of his brothers. That's one of the reasons why I always liked Raph. As a kid growing up, Raph was my man. You know, right now it seems to be in this day and age that Donatello is the most popular turtle. Everybody really likes Donatello. He's like the Egon of the Ghostbusters, but well, of the Ninja Turtles, so to speak. Speaking of Egon, as far as Ghostbusters go, fans love Egon more than any other Ghostbuster. But back in the late 80s and early 90s, most people, I think, would have said Venkman. So that's very unique. I'm always wondering who everyone's favorite turtle is and for what reason. It's like, if you like Raph, why do you like Raph? Why do you like Leo if you like Leo, and so on and so forth? Because as I've grown older, it's harder for me to choose which turtle I like better. When I was younger, it was a little bit easier. But at the same time, when it came down to the turtles' personality, just like the color of their bandanas, they represent, the colors are obviously different. And it's like, but it's like, it's not only representation of different colors, but it's like different personalities. Every single one of the turtles is different, but in a good way. But they were trained with a very similar style upon, as far as the martial arts goes. They were trained the same way, but at the same time, just like you have 4 different people, 4 different students, they have different attributes to them, which is good. In one of the turtles, I think it was comics or something like that, or maybe, I know it was one of the games to where the box cover had all the turtles wearing red bandanas. They were all like Raph, but yeah, they ended up changing that. But their personalities actually match their colors. You know, Leonardo keeps it cool with blue. Raphael is a hothead, so therefore it's red. Orange, you know, orange is it could be a very fun color. And then purple, I keep thinking of purple as, you know, the color of royalty, because that's how it was back in the day. It wasn't red, it was actually purple beforehand. But again, can't go wrong with purple either. And obviously we just went by the scene to where Danny took some of April's money. But over here, April's doing an interview with Chief Stearns, the chief of police. And then she asks all the right questions, aka the questions she's not supposed to ask. Or in other words, you know, the questions that put people like him on the spot. So, and the turtles are watching along this broken TV set. And Mike's got an immediate crush on her. And then over here, we get our first shot of the Shredder from the back. And he's got a ton of TVs. And he doesn't like what he sees, so throws a knife right on the TV and it sticks. And then at this point, he basically says, find her and shut her up. And thankfully, at the same time, Raphael, who wants his Psy back, starts putting on the disguise. He puts on the disguise because he's getting ready to go back out again. A little smirk on his face, too, because, you know, Raph, although he's very capable of smirking and having fun and laughing just like the rest of the turtles, you know, it's good to see him whenever he does smirk. Because, again, his weakness is that he's got a hot head. Well, it's a strength as well, if you think about it. And at this point, in the meeting between Chief Stearns and April, he's got, speaking of hotheads, kicked her out of the office, and oh, that's funny. Raph reading the newspaper, or pretending to read the newspaper, and he's gonna follow as she just misses a train. And all of this, you know, Raph just wants his Psy back, that's all. Because to the turtles, their weapons are pretty much everything. Kind of like the samurai. The samurai's sword is everything, and they're taught by in a Japanese art, so the weapons are that important to them. So it's a part of who they are. It's a part of them. And of course, foot soldiers happen to show up. Look at that. What do you got? Like 6 foot soldiers for one woman? And at this point, they don't even threaten her with her life. They just slap her and be like, hey, shut her mouth. Shut your mouth. Don't talk. She gets the sai out. Whoa, the foot soldier kicks it out, and then she decides to fight them. And boom, gets knocked out cold. And this is one of my favorite sequences of the film. Raph gets the sword and then just lets loose on these guys. And very effectively. Basically takes them all out very quickly. And it's a very simple scene in terms of how he takes them out. There's nothing like too fancy about that choreography right there. And we only see 3 foot soldiers get back up after that. The other 3, I don't know, probably ran away or something, but one of them follows. But yeah, very, very simple. It only lasted like 5 seconds or something like that, give or take. And took out many foot soldiers just like that. And it looked good too, especially that one punch where the foot soldier just went back like that. It was like it was a strong hit. So kudos to the choreography team and everything else and the angles that they filmed that to make it look as good as it does. Because things like that in this day is are just a little underappreciated sometimes. So and Michelangelo's like, hey, can we keep her? So and the soldier now knows where these guys are at, the foot soldiers, so that comes into play a little bit later. And April finally comes to, and what does she see? A human adult sized rat. And turtles. And she just starts screaming, and they scream, and then you get this funny scene to where they're all screaming. It's like, oh my gosh, even Raph is screaming. He's like, ah. She thinks she's dreaming. She thinks she's hallucinating. And and she's like, hey, I've seen you at the parking lot, the rat. And Splinter starts talking. And then she's like, wow, it talks. And he knows my name. Perfect. Ah, that's funny. And then she's like, why don't I ever dream of Harrison Ford? And now she gets a little bit of a backstory between all these turtles and everything like that, and they've been down there, and she's like, wow, these guys have been down here for 15 years. And pretty much by the time he tells the story, you know, she basically kind of calms down and accepts the fact that, yeah, these guys are real. Very simple, really. It's a really good way to basically introduce the origins of the turtles without taking too much time, which is good because timing in the film is a lot. Like, well, it's everything. You know, you got to keep the attention span going, especially when it comes to the kids. And then, and at the same time, you know, the longer the film is, the less you get to see it in theaters to a certain extent. And then you basically have canister of ooze, and then you got Splinter doing what Splinter does before he grew to full maturity. And then the turtles are just pretty much just doing their thing, and then they become big, and then, you know, nice little effects that they've done with the turtles in terms of how they grew. And it would have been pretty cool to see like their training as well, even if it was just for a few minutes. It would be pretty cool to see their training, but for the most part, you get a good idea of the turtles. So at the end of the day, they did a really good job of introducing the turtles. I'm not gonna lie, because it was so simple, and that's how it needed to be back then. As a matter of fact, simplicity's great. If done right, simplicity's great, and it's never boring. It's often welcomed. Yep, and right now April O'Neil is getting out of the sewer, ready to go home. Escorted by the turtles, of course. Actually, they actually walked all the way to just below her house, actually, her area. I don't have anything to offer you guys except for frozen pizza. And whoa, Michelangelo just pops out. He's like, you said the magic word. Like, you guys eat pizza? There's like, doesn't everybody? So, and then Leo's down there, just like, hey, did she say pizza? And then here Michelangelo fucks with her. He's like, what do you guys like on your pizza? Well, oh, the usual stuff, flies, stay bugs. And she's like, it was a joke. Michelangelo impersonating Rocky, that's so funny. Yep, and Michelangelo is full of life, I'm telling you. And Raph is just like kind of like almost like rolling his eyes, but not exactly. And then April gets them back with a joke like, "Hey, you dirty rat! That must be Splinter's favorite." And everybody's looking at her like, "What?" She's like, "It was a joke." They start laughing. Even Raph gets a little chuckle out of it. And then they were up all night because it's daytime now. And again, when you look at the way they talk and everything like that, you know, in terms of from her to the turtles and backwards, it's like thinking, she's like, wow, interesting. And it just goes to show that everything's about timing. They go back and their place has been broken into, and now the story changes. Now, I mean, the everything starts to change, and then knowing what you know already, Raph is gonna lose his shit. Yep, basically screaming, but not in a way that would make somebody laugh. Like, haha, no, no, no. That was like a war scream or whatnot. He's ready to fucking beat people's asses at this point. And then the turtles go back to April, and they're very sad. They don't know. I mean, Splinter's been taken, but they don't know where he is or who took him. So now at this point, the movie itself is kind of like in serious mode, but not so serious that it takes the rest of the meaning of what Turtles is. So nice little camera angle to where the turtles are waking up and you first see nothing but their shells. And their shells look good. They look very real and everything. So, and with their ninja skills, they pretty much hide pretty quick. So, she's been working really hard on the story, and her boss wants somebody else to handle it. And of course, like a reporter, she's like, no, it's my story, no way. Like, look at you, you're exhausted. She's like, I just had a rough night, that's all. So I think again, when you look at this film and when you see like, ooh, Michelangelo got spotted through the mirror. Kid turns around, he's not there. Ha! Damn, Michelangelo's quick. Wow. All of them are so quick. Donatello was just standing in the bathtub, and the next thing you know, he's way up there. That's so funny. Don't push any buttons, April, and you know she will. And a little conversation between father and son in the car. Of course, you're stealing. You make more than enough to make more than enough to provide for both of us, and you're stealing. Why? Stealing car stereos and shit. So, and then upon stopping the car, the kid gets out and starts running. And goes to the subway, and of course, he heads back to the foot soldiers headquarters, where you see kids, very young kids, smoking cigars and playing pool and just, you know, pretty much almost as if they were orphans. I mean, some of them are, I'm sure, but basically they're given freedom to do whatever they want whenever they want. And then at the end of the day, they're just, some of them, I guess, are hoping to become foot soldiers. And look at that, you see some gambling going on, basically in their own little world right there. But because of the freedom that they're given up, that they're given through Shredder and the Foot Clan, they're you know, plus obviously the word of mouth. It's like, hey, you don't want to be, or you don't want to do this. It's like, hey, come with us. Anything. Like this kid over here, he's like, you want a cigarette? Do you have any cigarettes? He's like, regular or menthol? Gambling, playing cards. And one kid runs into Tatsu and he's like scared and he's like, it's okay, go play. And Tatsu has his own little temper tantrum to an extent. Look at that, and you see some good old sparring. And the equipment they're wearing for sparring, I'm all too familiar with. Very old school. It hasn't changed all that much, at least when I took martial arts and when I taught it. We used slightly different pieces of gear, but the gear was about the same. Except of course you added the never lower your eyes to an enemy. Went to bow and he got kicked. And the bell rings, and of course the kids listen to that. And then of course you see the shadow of a very famous Ninja Turtles character, and a very good introduction. Well, it's not the first time we see him in the film, but like this is like his introduction where you actually do see him. And the Shredder's the main boss. He's the main bad guy in this film, and rightfully so, because he's the most famous, even in the cartoon, despite the fact that Krang is probably the, you know, the main, if not like one of the two mains. It was Shredder and Krang in the cartoon, but in this film, they just have Shredder, which made a lot more sense. I'm sure when they made the film, they were like, yeah, it just wouldn't make too much sense and it just doesn't fit in really well to have Krang. But, you know, you have Shredder, it just makes a lot more sense. And it's pretty clear that Shredder and Tatsu run the whole thing. So, and we don't get too much story, or actually we don't get any story about Tatsu really, except the fact that he's the one that answers to Shredder. Like he won't answer to anybody else but Shredder. He won't bow to anybody else but Shredder. So, and there's a reason for that. Who knows? Maybe they were both students or something like that. You know what the funny thing is? I never really did much research or anything on Tatsu, but he's, Shredder's the main boss. This guy, Tatsu's like the sub boss of this movie, Shredder's right hand, so to speak. So, and this is, the kids definitely listen. These kids are listening, so. As one of them turns into a foot soldier. Very similar to almost like making your black belt or something like that to a certain extent, but there's a little bit different. So Shredder basically just explains to them everything that's going on. He's like telling them who he is and all that, but without going into depth. He's like, the outside world rejects you. That's why you're here. So he's like, this is your family. I'm your father, stuff like that. This is how Shredder actually takes control of these kids, basically, and gets them to do his bidding, because they're kind of given freedom to do whatever they want. And of course, somebody who gives that to you, you're going to listen to them, especially when you're that age, where you're not fully grown or developed yet. And then he talks about the turtles. And then Danny, being in the crowd, of course, has something to say about the turtles because he may know. So. And of course, turtles are watching on the news as always, except this time they're doing it from April O'Neil's apartment. But yeah. And that's nice to see a reporter like that. Look at that. See how she looks at the camera and stuff like that. I doubt that Chief Stearns is taking all this seriously, and her boss is watching, and he's like, "Oh, great! Now I'm gonna hear it." And then he's like, "Pennington, I thought we had a deal." So, and then she talks about how she got away from her attackers. Some citizens of New York actually came to my rescue. And Raph is smiling because he knows he's got something coming. If he's watching, thanks, Raphael. And all the turtles are looking at him like, "Oh, you Studley." I think he's blushing. I think he's turning red. And then he throws it down the side. He throws down the side, and he's like, "Huh, maybe not." So again, Raph always has that side to him to where, he's always triggered very easily, and that's what that's where he and Leo are like almost total opposites. It's like they're the top two students of the class in terms of their fighting ability. They stand out. And then you've got one that's centered, and then you got one that's got a temper tantrum. That's what makes the relationship so easily. It's like, the thing is, at the end of the day, now they're having a little confrontation, a little argument, and Leo is being the a little bit more common sense and stuff like that, and acting like the biggest brother or whatnot. So, but and then Donatello and Mike are just having snacks in the kitchen, keeping things simple. And then Raph goes to the roof and he just starts doing some moves. So that way he can cool off. Hey, look, Gatorade bottle. One when they were in glass instead of plastic, which is pretty interesting. And then Casey Jones just happens to be on the roof of his building and he sees something at a distance. And of course, he grabs his binoculars and wham bam, there it is. The same turtle that he met a few nights prior. And it's a good thing that Casey Jones saw when he saw what he saw, because of what's about to happen. And I've always loved this scene to where when the scene where Raph takes on a bunch of foot soldiers by himself, but he's obviously a little too surrounded, but at the same time he still does a great job at fighting these guys, because it shows you the difference between somebody who's been training for like 15 years of their life and then your average foot soldier. And of course it shows the difference between the quality of the teachers. Because believe it or not, a good teacher will make the difference. I know that for sure. Especially when it comes to like a student that's average. So yeah. But Raph, like, okay, how do I put this? The choreography of a lot of these fights in this film are really pretty damn solid. Like when you look at how, like, all these moves here are like, again, it's all there's very, like, I'd say 90% of it, 80 to 90% of it is pretty solid. Nothing too fancy or anything like that. And then Raph gets a little cocky. He's like, "How do you guys expect to beat me?" And then all of a sudden, more of them show up, and he's like, "Yep, good answer." But obviously, very very difficult to take on that many people at once, especially when they crowd you at the same time. That's one thing about movies, is like when you see a scene when there's one person going up against like so many, one or two of them attack at a time at the most, and then you've got people at all over the place. And again, this, despite this, being the movie that it is, it's like you see him get kicked in the face a few times, you see him get beat up pretty good, you get it, like he's getting dragged down steps and the back of his head hits the steps. I mean, it's you know he gets kicked while he's down. See? Ooh, wow, and they throw him right through the glass. Holy moly. And then they break into April's apartment from all over the place. Through the windows, through the front door, armed to the teeth, and a bunch of them. And now you get one foot soldier who's basically playing nunchucks. And then Michelangelo's like, "Oh, a chucker, eh?" And then they have a little bit of a contest of Michelangelo's chuck skills versus foot soldier's chuck skills. And of course, the foot soldier can't stick with it. Yep, and of course the fight ensues, and then the foot soldiers take on the turtles, and yeah, you see all the turtles for the first time taking on a whole bunch of ninja turtles. Excuse me, foot soldiers. And it's a very cool scene, because we've seen that in the cartoons previously, but we've never seen it in live action. So you of course think it's really cool when you finally get to see what you've been seeing in action in the cartoons, and what you see in the video games finally being brought to life on the big screen. And there's a little bit of comedy in the fights, but there's, again, the score is good. The fight choreography is pretty good for what it is. Again, very basic, but that's how it was back in the 90s. And that's one of the things that, like, that's actually really good from a practical standpoint. So it's like they didn't make it too fancy to where it's not believable, but at the same time, it wasn't too basic to where it was like, this is boring. It was fun enough, and short and sweet. Like the one-on-one fight scenes don't take very long, and, well, up until the end at least, anyway. And then Michelangelo and Donatello always have something to say. And it seems like you got an unlimited amount of foot soldiers. So they it's like God knows how many foot soldiers they sent just for the sake of the turtles themselves. And then, of course, the floor caves in, and as they go back down to the first one. And then there's Tatsu with more soldiers, orders them to attack, and then the turtles are like, oh no. And it also goes to show you just how much more skilled the turtles are, because there's only 4 of them. Actually 3 now, because Raph is down. And a ton of foot soldiers. And they can only handle so much. Especially with the limited amount of space and stuff like that, so. And then Raph is using... Oh, man. Yep, it gets to the point to where even Michelangelo says that we could really use Raph right about now. And then the door opens, a big light comes in, and guess who it is? Casey Jones himself. Armed. He's like, what are you guys doing with my little green friend over there, huh? Then he immediately sees April O'Neil, and he's like, ooh, who's the babe? And that's funny. Leo's like, who's that? And then Mike's like, Wayne Gretzky on steroids? And then they start attacking him, and then he starts taking them on. Yeah, like from now on, the movie just kind of has a different theme to it as things kind of get serious, as the building starts to fall apart and on fire. And just the overall theme of the film, because Raph is now injured and Splinter is still not there. You know, he's obviously kidnapped. So, and then the turtles basically have to, at this point, have to retreat because they're very outnumbered and everything else that's going on. So, but thankfully they managed to get out, while April basically gets a message on her phone and she's basically fired. And the only thing is, we never really got to see the Ninja Turtles car in this film, or the truck, or the Turtles. I don't know. I don't remember what it was called, but it made a hell of a toy. But April's home being on fire, and that kind of sucks. The whole building was on fire, so. And Danny sees it from a distance, and he starts to feel bad. And Shredder's pissed because he knows now that turtles can fight, and he's like, how do they know how to fight like that? Should be obvious, though, Shredder, that they've been taught by Splinter. And according to the story, before Splinter turned into what he turned into, and perhaps even after, well, in the cartoon it happens quite a lot, but and some at the end of this film, but like Splinter, you know, would beat Shredder every time there was a confrontation. So even though they set out to, you know, they definitely, like Tatsu over here is going in the locker room where the foot soldiers are and starts beating their asses. And again, he was just a kid in a foot soldier outfit, getting his ass kicked by a guy who's supposed to be leading them, and all because he's got a bad temper. You can see right there, those foot soldiers are just lost kids. that think their mentors are the people who know the right way when it's apparently something that's not true, which again is a very adult theme. And again, kids can relate to it, teens can relate to it, adults can relate to it. And that kind of theme in this film um, hits pretty hard. And then what's really cool is that Danny, being in the position that he is right now as a kid who's lost, right? He's got a father. He's got a father that means well, but obviously, at the same time, kind of pushes Danny away to a certain extent because the message is not getting across. He's like, I doubt my dad could care less about me, and Splinter's like, I doubt that's true. So, and Splinter says all fathers care for their sons, and most of the time that is true. Most of the time that is true. Back in the 90s, that statement was a very bold statement. Well, I'm sorry, not a very bold statement. It was a very strong statement that would not be wrong 90+% of the time. Unfortunately, in this day and age, I don't know what the percentage is of that. But you like to think that your father would care, but for those of us that do have fathers that care, or parents that care, we're lucky. Even if it's just one of the two, we're lucky. We can't choose our parents. That's another thing. But the thing is, the unique thing about the Danny situation is that he thinks that his dad doesn't care because he doesn't understand, or because of lack of communication, and for the fact that he's probably been hanging around nothing but kids who have a different view of things, or who have been told differently, which has an influence. Because sometimes all it takes is for a friend or a peer to say this, and if you don't know any better, or if you're not sure what to think, or if you don't have a good foundation, or something like that, in terms of how you were raised and everything like that, it's very easy to believe the influence of other people. And that's kind of the subtle message that it's not really subtle, but it's the message that this movie actually carries along with it. And then April and Casey Jones over here are having an argument because he told her that she was fired, according to, and he tried to tell her easy, and she's like, you failed. And then both of them kind of temper off and slam their doors. And then Donatello is like, that's kind of like moonlighting, isn't it? So at this point, Raph is in a bathtub of water, I guess. And Leo is just kind of very sad about the situation. And April is writing in her journal, and she's also a really good artist because she can actually draw portraits of the turtles, and they've suffered their first defeat at this point. But you know, and of course they don't know about what's going on with Splinter as well. Then you got Donatello and Casey Jones working on the truck, and I'm talking about Gilligan's Island. There's a manly chemistry between those two, so, which is good. So Casey Jones basically at this point, along with the turtles, ends up establishing a very, very unique type of what's it called? A very unique type of and they're playing games where they call each other names in alphabetical order. That's cute. Um, but there's there's a relationship that's established now. So Casey has friends now in the turtles, and vice versa, and which is good. So that drawing of Leonardo I really like, and everything from like the eyes and the expressions of the turtles really stands out in this film. It's like so believable, just everything. And she describes Casey Jones as a 9-year-old trapped in a man's body. If it wasn't for his pig-headedness, he might also almost be cute. That's interesting. See, it just goes to show you right there that the ladies care about the personality just as much as everything else. As a matter of fact, personality comes first, or else you won't be nearly as cute. No matter how physically cute you are, you won't be nearly as cute if your personality doesn't match. You know, I mean, I'm sure there are some exceptions to the rule here or there, but usually that leads to mistakes or heartache or other things. But as time goes on, there's attraction and chemistry that grows between both Casey and April. Wouldn't ask for your help if you were the last thing on the face of this planet. That's funny. And then Casey's like, it's coming along nicely. And then the bench breaks. That's funny. And he likes green apples. I've been having a lot of red apples and peanut butter lately. I got to get back into having green apples. I think they're supposedly better for you, if I'm not mistaken, because, you know, the sour apples are, you know, they don't contain as much sugar, I guess, as regular. I don't know. This is where I have to talk to a dietitian about this. And that's cool, though. They have, like, so much information and so much knowledge about food. They're basically food doctors. And at this point, Raph is... This is like as calm as you see Raph and as open as you see Raph because of him recovering from his injuries and stuff, getting his butt whipped by so many soldiers. But he's still Raph. At the end of the day, he's like, you know. And one of the rarest and coolest parts are when Leo and Raph actually embrace, because usually they're on ends at least half of the time. So when they embrace like that, it's a good sight to see. And then Raph is all healed up and they train. So that's good that they're continuing on with the tradition. That's actually Mike right there hitting the bag. I used to thought it was Raph, but it's not. It's actually Mike hitting the bag, and you see them. They're still training. They're still doing what their master has taught them over the years. And then the foot soldiers are pretty much slaves at this point, in somewhat ninja costumes or whatnot. And then Danny's run away from the ninja clan or Shredder's clan. He's kind of missing. And then Tatsu asked Shredder, why do the turtles trouble you? And then he said something about the way you described their fighting. Something from the past, something familiar. So, because Splinter and Shredder, according to the lore, if I'm not mistaken, they were trained by the same master. They were trained by the same teacher and everything. So it worries him because Splinter was the best student and he's got 4 sons. So even though they're not his biological sons, obviously, because they're turtles and he's a rat. But that's not what a true father is. And I know this because I was actually raised by a man who was not my biological father. But after some time, I called him dad because that's what he did. He did what a father's supposed to do. You know, the mating part is the easy part. It's what comes after is where the challenge is. So for anybody listening to this, and if you literally can't have kids, or if you haven't found somebody that's that you're compatible with, or whatever the deal is, in order to have that sort of thing, just bear in mind that you don't have to. Being a dad isn't limited to genetics, so to speak. It's about everything else. It's about the relationship more than anything else. It really is. And that's what counts. Michelangelo found turtle wax and he's like just laughing. He's like, huh. And just little things in this. So, and then you see Raph, of course, Raph being a little bit more open and lighthearted, especially after everything that's happened. So, but at the same time, it's and then here we go, Leonardo with a very important part of the film just starts meditating. Just relaxes and meditates, and he's able to communicate with Splinter. And Splinter looks really good in this film, like in terms of everything, the way they made him look, it just looks so real. even for the 90s, and we're in 2023, and this film, like the Turtles, just everything looks good. The Turtles have never looked better. I mean, I'd argue maybe in Ninja Turtles 2 they look just as good, but they look good in this film, and they look good in the second one. The third one, not as much. Um, but in this film and in the second film, they look really good. And I like how their bandanas are not 100% clean either, because of kind of like belts, you know, like if I were to show you guys my belt collection of when I used to train and teach in martial arts, you know, if I show you my, especially my old belts, you know, because my latest belt, I didn't train with it very often, very much, because I only trained with it for 1 year before I ended up stopping. But all my old belts and stuff like that, they're worn, they're not as, you know, the color is faded and all that kind of stuff, which is what you see in the bandanas here, which is great, which again goes to show you like their experience, their age, and all that kind of stuff. And as they grow older, it's going to fade even more. You're always going to be able to tell the colors, but they'll still be faded. But and just about what you guys know about martial arts is there only used to be one belt. It was a white belt, and the training used to be outdoors. So within time, the belt would get darker and darker because of all the dirt and all the stuff that and debris that would get all over it. And after a while, that belt would turn black. So that's where the belt system gets its inspiration from, because that's how it used to be. Obviously, now that has changed, and it's also a way for the instructor to know exactly where the student is in their progression in terms of what they should know and what they shouldn't know, as well as the stripes that come along with that, depending on the curriculum. But that's where the belts came from, and this is a very emotional part of the film right here, where they all meditate and Splinter just pops up and he communicates with them. Very emotional part of the film, and a good part of the film, you know. And it also shows you like you know, how close they truly are as a family. I don't know. Sometimes as I get older, when I was a kid, I didn't want any brothers or sisters. I didn't want any siblings. I just wanted to be all about me, right? But now that I'm older, you know, I'm like, you know what? It would have been pretty cool to have a brother. And it would have been interesting to see how that was. How things would have been if I had a younger brother, or how things would have been if I had an older brother. I'm not sure. I don't know. And I'll never know. But that's okay. You know, the cool thing is you can still have a friend that could be like a brother. As rare as that is. You know, just like going back to the father and son thing. It doesn't have to be genetic. It just has to be uh there just has to be that relationship and that level of respect and that level of commitment. That's all it is, really, at the end of the day. And now they head back into town, back to the sewers. And this, I didn't know this, but now I know what it's like to travel without a green card. I didn't know that as a kid. I'm like, what did that mean as a kid? But it's like, oh, what a reference. And it's raining. Speaking of rain, we're going to have rain in a couple days here in Florida, which I'm looking forward to, because we haven't had a decent amount of rain in a while. So I'm looking forward to that on Saturday. I always love rain. I like the sound of rain and everything. I don't know about you guys, but that's just me. But yeah, Danny knows where the turtles are. He knows their hideout, and he's broken in there, and I guess that's where he ran off to, because it felt like home to him and all that stuff. So, but he made a little noise, and then yeah, they found him. But of course, ran away from home. Now the question is, what is home? Is home the Foot Clan, or is home with his dad? At the end of the day, this is a lost kid. So at the end of the day, it's like again, that theme pops up, you know, of a lost kid, but that's okay. And Casey Jones thought Donatello was calling him gay. He's like, I never even looked at another guy before, and then Donatello just starts cracking up. Oh man. You know the a lot of the subtle messages that this movie gives is just absolutely hilarious. But, you know, that's what makes this movie what it is. Oh, and then there's the pizza word, and it's right next to Donatello, and then Michelangelo, of course. He's like, he's like, I got a question. Do you like penicillin on your pizza? And Michelangelo's like, oh, is there penicillin on that pizza? Really though? But yeah, this goes to show you, man. Donatello and Michelangelo really love their pizza. Well, they all do, but obviously Michelangelo is the one that loves the pizza the most, But it's like, and Casey Jones, of course, is going to sleep in the truck. And then Danny, of course, has a nightmare that night and is thinking about what Shredder said, or apparently that's what he was seeing in his dream of when we first saw Shredder in the film. Well, the main appearance, not when we first saw him. The second time we saw him, but the main appearance of the film. And then upon leaving, Casey Jones sees this, and yep, he's going to go after him. And that's how we find out where the Turtles the Ninja Clan's headquarters is, or the Foot Clan's headquarters. Casey Jones saw Danny and went after him. And then Casey, of course, is like, he's like, what? So yeah. And Danny goes back because of Splinter. Because he has somebody to talk to. He's kind of got like a mentor, so to speak. And that's Splinter, really. That's what he is. He plays the mentor role really well. Every single time the turtles are out of hand, he puts them back in place and he provides that balance, that wisdom. Like one of the things that I like about the fourth film, the animated film, is that he says he has a conversation with Raph and he's like, hey, just because you're not always my favorite student doesn't mean you're my least favorite son. So, which is very important because not just as a teacher or as a mentor or as a father, what you got to do is you can't just be on your kids about the mistakes they make. You also have to show that you also have to praise them for what they do well. And that's actually proper teaching. It's when I was coming up in the instructor program, when I taught martial arts, it's one of the things they taught us is like, you don't like, that's one of the things that you read about, in the manual and everything like that. And it's like, yeah, it's, you got to be complimentary as well. You can't just tell the student what they suck at, right? Or what they're not good at, what they need to work at. You're beating them down, but you also got to bring them up at the same time. It's like you also got to have that that positive reinforcement as well. It's like you got to tell them like, hey, you need to work on this, but at the same time, you got to tell them like, hey, you're doing this very well. You do this awesome and stuff like that. So you're giving them confidence and even though you're giving them confidence, which is legit, right? I mean, it's got to be legit. You're also giving them the truth, and you basically are saying, okay, you're not very good at this, but it doesn't mean you'll never be good at it. So in this scene right here, you see that, you know, that how everything happened with Shredder, and how where he got the scar from. I don't know if that's canon or not, but for a non-canon story, they did a good job of including that. And now Danny knows the symbol that he's been wearing on his head the whole time, after he told him the story of how Shredder killed his master and his wife, his master's wife. So basically he's representing Shredder by wearing that, and he's like, you know, and then he decides by himself to just take it off, and he drops it to the floor, which is a decision he makes on himself. And then Shredder pops up along with Tatsu. He's like, what are you doing in there, boy? And he's like, nothing. Then Shredder sees that it's down on the floor, and he's not happy with what he sees, and he's like, where have you been? And another thing that's really cool is that they're doing a really good job with Shredder's voice. Like it sounds like really good, better than it did in the cartoon. And they also did a good job with Shredder's costume. And then Shredder finds the drawing of Leonardo in his pocket, and he says that they're back. And then they leave. And then they leave. You know, they don't punish the kid or anything. He's like, and then this time Shredder's like, I'm gonna go myself as well. There's not gonna be a mistake. And then at this point, Danny just heard that Shredder told Tatsu to kill Splinter, like the rat, kill the rat. So, and then Casey at this point is disguised as a foot soldier in order to get there. Bam. So as soon as they told him they're going to kill Splinter, he's like, what? So Casey's not sure what all that means. He's a little confused, but or he does know, because he probably heard about Splinter from the Turtles. And now you see that those foot soldiers are on their way to take out the Turtles, since they know he's back, that they're back. And but this time the Turtles are ready. That's the difference. And they're on the Turtles' turf. They're not, you know, they're not in April's apartment, so to speak, right? They're on their own turf, and nobody knows their turf better than they do. So that's what happens at the end of the day. So and Raph just finished is done eating an apple pretty much. Knowing Raph, he probably ate the apple while he was fighting. And Raph is all about fighting, and he could use it. And then Splinter's like, all right, where's the key? And Splinter finally gets to leave from there. But not so fast. Got a whole bunch of kids behind Tatsu. You got this little cool little, almost like montage like fight scene, to where the Turtles are taking on the foot soldiers. Again, the cartoon brought to life one more time. Except this time the fight lasts longer, and it goes out into the streets and onto the rooftop, apparently, where onto the rooftop, and then they eventually meet up, and then they eventually, you know, get it on with Shredder. And now over here, Casey Jones is mocking Tatsu because of the way Tatsu talks. He's like, "Er." He's like, "Hey, maybe a little mouth spray might help." And then, ooh, gets punched to the ground, takes another hit, and then takes a kick. And Casey Jones takes a little bit of a beating in this one over here, where he tries to reason with Tatsu, but he's like, we got a language barrier thing going on here, so good job to the actor playing Casey with that, Elias Koteas. He's doing a good job with the choreography and taking those hits, making it look really intense. Like he's really getting, like as if he were really getting hit. And of course, a good old golf club saves his life, playing a little cricket. 4. And Tatsu didn't see that coming. And thanks to that golf club, he's also got a newfound respect for golf. He's like, I'll never call, I'll never call golf a boring game again, or a dull game, excuse me. So, um, yeah. And then you see Donatello with the good old skateboard, which is again another nod to the cartoon. I mean, I would say it's also a nod to the one some of the games, but I mean, Turtles in Time didn't come out till after this, to my knowledge at least. And then before then, we had a lot of the regular Nintendo games, which there might have been some skateboarding levels, but I don't think so. And then over here at this point, you got the kids saying how loyal they are to the Shredder, and he's like, "Why?" He's like, "He's using you. He doesn't care about you." He's like, "We're family." He's like, and Casey's like, "What, you call this your family?" Giving some a dose of reality to the kids. When you got kids that are that lost, they'll listen to anything because they don't know what's right or wrong, or haven't been shown, or think what's wrong is right and what's right is wrong. And you look at all these kids over here in this scene, you got everywhere from um, kids that are like in middle school to like the high teens. Again, a bunch of lost people that didn't know where to go, so they turned to Shredder, or the clan and everything like that. Because at the end of the day, all they've ever wanted was what every other kid wants, but for whatever reason, it just didn't happen. When you look at it that way, I mean, granted, I'm sure there's a few blurred lines here and there, but still, you get the point. And basically, at this point, it's a different story in terms of how this fight went compared to the last fight, because the turtles are able to do what they do. They've got more room, and taking out the soldiers is a lot easier this time because of they're not so enclosed. They got their weapons to work with, and this time they were ready. That's the difference. A little bit of turtle action from Michelangelo, ducking his head under. And we finally make it to the rooftop for the remaining foot soldiers and the turtles going at it. And this is basically where the end of the film takes place. The very ending of this film takes place on this rooftop, and everybody is just going at it and fighting. And then if you're a kid in the movie theater watching this, you're just beside yourself. You're like, wow, this is incredible. This is it's like just like the cartoon, but it's better. And yeah, when you were a kid and you saw these movies in theaters, you couldn't wait for them to come out on VHS, and you just watch it over and over again. Nice little spin hook kick by Raphael, taking out 3 soldiers at once, and all the soldiers are down. And then Raphael's like, oh, no more. And then here we go. Shredder drops down, and then all of a sudden the theme changes. Much darker theme, and much more serious, because now they got to deal with him, and they've never dealt with somebody like Shredder before, and it's shown very well in these next few scenes, very well. So at this point, they're like, hey, I don't have to. You never has to ask for a can opener. And then Shredder's like, you fight well in the old style. Now you face me. So caused me enough trouble, so now you face me. So anyway, here we go. Raph comes in. He's like, I got him. Trevor gets ready, and then first time you see a turtle get taken out one-on-one, just like that. And Shredder has yet to be touched, and he's already taken out Raph and Leo. So a little bit different now. You know, the level that they're facing this time is quite different. In I believe in the cartoons, I don't know about the 90s cartoons, but from what I've seen, like whenever the Turtles would face Shredder, the only one that would stand a chance at beating Shredder one-on-one would be Leo, according to the cartoons and probably the lore. And that's kind of hinted at in this movie. But so far, obviously, that hasn't been present yet. Not yet, at least. And then there's a little kind of a montage scene to where they take him on one by one and they all get their asses handed to him, including Leo, but Leo actually gets a hit. So here we go. They're all charging at him, but they obviously end up taking him one-on-one. So it's going to start with Donatello. And nice little fact, Ernie Reyes Jr. is in the suit in these fight scenes with Donatello. See? Boom, that's Ernie Reyes Jr. And then he gets taken out. And then next up, you got Michelangelo. Again, he gets taken out. Raphael's next. He doesn't get a piece either, and he gets taken out. And Shredder actually used sweeps to take out all three of the turtles. He swept Donatello on the leg, and then with Michelangelo, he kind of went between the legs, and then he basically, if you look really close, he swept Raphael on the legs as well and kind of pushed him. So very technical. And then Casey Jones stops a few foot soldiers, and then here we go, Leo versus Donatello. And Donatello gets a piece by slicing his arm, and then he hits him a second time by getting him on the shoulder, and then he gets knocked down. So I used to think he only hit Shredder once, but he hit him twice. If you go back and watch the scene, you'll see it. First time he slices his arm clean, and then the second time he hits him on one of his shoulder spikes. And that's what ended up happening. So those shoulder spikes actually saved Shredder's ass. So it's not just for looks. And it's shown. Like Shredder with his spear, which he's very, very technical with it in terms of how he uses it. And the techniques that are used are very basic techniques. And if you think about it, like one of the things that I used to tell my students, I'm like, listen, the only difference between a basic technique and an advanced technique is that a basic technique is just one technique fairly, but an advanced technique is a combination of basics put together into one move. So because the more advanced a technique gets, the more steps there are into finishing, and then eventually you turn it into one by making everything just kind of flow together. So I used to break things down when I taught, especially the younger students. Well, I did it with everybody, but it was more of a necessity with the younger students because they usually take more bites in order to finish their burger, so to speak, right? So you got to break it down into multiple pieces, smaller pieces, and at the same time it depended on the student. And then Splinter shows up, and the turtles are glad to see him, and then they're like, "Holy crap, it's him!" Shredder takes off the front of his mask, and you can see it's him all those years later. And he starts charging at Splinter, and you're like, "Oh boy!" And then Splinter grabs the nunchuck and does a little reversal. And let's not mention the fact that Splinter has been like kidnapped without food or anything, like over the last few days or whatnot. And then Shredder tries to get Splinter, but nope. And Splinter lets him go and falls off the building, and then Casey Jones just kind of finishes the job, so to speak, or so we think. And yeah, I mean, so many different themes to this film, and it all fits perfectly. There's nothing really that's out of place in this film, and that's why it was so masterfully done, in my opinion, in terms of storytelling, and not just storytelling, but in terms of how the characters are represented. And right now at the end, you see, kind of all the cops show up to this scene and putting the finishing touches on the film. And then obviously at the end, the turtles embrace and they cowabunga for the first time. You see, of course, foot soldiers getting arrested, and April gets her job back. Danny gives April back her $20 bill that he stole from earlier in the film. And he's like, trust me, it's something I owe you. So, and it's a $20 bill. And back then, $20 bills were worth more. And the funny thing is, whenever I saw that $20 bill, it would remind me of the arcades, because I was blessed enough, extremely blessed and very lucky, that whenever I did go to the arcade, I'd usually get a 20. My mom would give me a 20, and I would just throw that sucker into the coin slot, and I'd get a shit ton of tokens at the arcade, and I would just go to town and play. And every once in a while, on weekends where I had more time, sometimes I'd get even more. But at the same time, as a kid, I really didn't know the value of money. I just didn't know any better. But I learned the hard way sometime later. But you still appreciate those kind of gestures and stuff like that. So at this point, April O'Neil gets her job back, and then obviously she gets together with Casey, and they officially become a couple at the very end, and the Turtles cheer them on. And then at this point, she's got her job back with a good raise and all that kind of other stuff. And then you've got the kids over here, that you got the Chief Stearns talking to the kids and that were lost, and now they have a better idea of what's the truth and what's not. And he's like, go check out the East Warehouse and Linderman Island. You get your answers there. So, and then she's ready to go reporting again. It's what she does. And then Casey comes up by her and he's like, hi. I look like I just called Mike Tyson a sissy. And then all you just say is hi. You don't need an ambulance, do you? That's so funny. And she's like, just looks at him, but and she looks at him and he's like, shut up and kiss me. I got a report to do. 9.95. And just like the movie started, where they were kind of parading after their first victory, and then their latest victory right here, parading again one more time, just like everything came full circle. And then at this point, Shredder kind of comes in as they're celebrating, and except this time they're all celebrating, including Raph. So they don't know how to finish it off, and then Shredder's like, I've always liked Cowabunga. And everything came full circle, and then they say Cowabunga, and then I'm sure all the kids they were like, Cowabunga. And then Splinter's like, I made a funny. And then you get the TURTLE power. And then Raph actually hugs Splinter at the end while the turtles are dancing, and then that's the end of the film. A really good way to finish it off. And then you've got the TURTLE power song as the credits roll. Such a damn good film. Good soundtrack, just good everything. Just unique. You know, the Turtles really did take over the 90s, especially in the early to mid 90s. You know, this movie brings back a lot of, it makes you feel a certain way when the movie's done, or even when you're watching it. So I'm sure people around my age, which is 38, can kind of feel a certain way about this film. We were kids when this film came out. Some of us saw it in theaters. Some of us didn't. I didn't, unfortunately. I saw Turtles 2 and Turtles 3 in theaters, though. But I guess we'll talk about that more in another commentary. So for those of you guys that watched along, I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did watching it and commentating over it. And we will see you on the next commentary. And Cowabunga, baby.